Welcome, everybody, to the next edition of the Stay on Course podcast. Today, I have Rain Bennett. He's an award-winning filmmaker and the author of Chief Storytelling Officer. And he helps growth stage companies turn scattered messaging into a clear narrative operating system that aligns brand, product, sales, and culture. As the host of the Storytelling Lab and Fractional Chief Storytelling Officer, he equips founders to lead with story as a strategy so their vision becomes a belief system that drives real decisions and real growth. And today, we are going to unpack storytelling in this episode because it's far more than a marketing tactic. And it is why brands are winning today. And we're going to be talking about building a narrative operating system. Welcome, Rain, to the Stay on Course podcast.
Thank you so much. And what an intro. I love how you put all that. It was right on the money.
I love it. Thank you so much for being a guest today. But before we get started, Rain, I ask all of my guests, what is your favorite food?
I thought about this. This is hard for me to say. I eat a lot of very boring things every day. But I'm from the coast, so I would have to say seafood is probably my favorite when I think about what would be hard to live without.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love when people say seafood because seafood is like one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
How do you like it and which one do you like the best?
So I'm from an area that is brackish water, so it's half salt, half fresh. So that also produces an estuary. So there's a lot of wildlife there and a lot of great seafood. So I grew up on oysters and shrimp and blue crabs and
Mm.
flounder and all the various types of fish. So not quite like deep sea out in the ocean, although I have done that, and not like inland waters or fresh waters. So
Oh.
there's a plethora of them. And I mean, my dad, we had a place on the river, used to find oysters just with his feet in the sand and would crack them open on the pier and just knock them back right there as raw as you can get them. So I have it all different ways. Fried is very popular.
Love fried food.
Yeah. Fry some of the taste out of it, but for some folks, a raw oyster
So good.
just doesn't go down easily.
Yeah,
For me,
that's
for
true.
me,
That's
I
true.
can take it all ways.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that. Tell us just a little bit about this new book that's coming out.
I'm really excited about this one. It's one I've been marinating on and thinking about for a few years. So my background is in documentary filmmaking. I've done that for 20 years, and that's what led me to the so-called storytelling space, where I then started helping brands understand how to speak from the heart, how to connect with your audience through story, especially if you don't have a lot of technical skill in video production or filmmaking. Documentary filmmakers classically never have enough time, they never have enough money, they never have enough resources, but they're still tasked with creating stories that move people to take action, right? And move them emotionally. So when I started teaching this and coaching and consulting and writing my first book, this was probably around 2017, 2018. Well, now at this point, all brands need to be content creators, but most of them weren't writers or filmmakers or artists, especially if they're a small brand or a startup or a nonprofit. So that's who I started to serve. Well, this has developed a lot now, and storytelling is no longer a new concept. I mean, it's never been a new concept, but in the corporate world. And as I've gone deeper and had my own show and talked to storytellers of all different disciplines around the world, I've understood so much more about it. Then I started seeing that this role started becoming more and more popular. That's called either a chief storyteller or a chief storytelling officer, basically the same. There are also other terms or titles that are effectively the same position. So I started having them on my show and really picking and trying to dig into like what exactly does this role like look like? Not, I mean, it sounds cool. Hey, I'm a storyteller. I'd love a job like that, but what does it really mean? What are the daily tasks, not just the big picture ideas? And so a few years ago, I had the idea to write the book. I wrote it, finished writing it last year. It's coming out this August. Well, now, and I feel very fortunate about this, everywhere you look, every publication around the world right now was posting about how I was going to say corporate America, but it's not just corporate America, it's all over the globe. corporations are desperately, this was a Wall Street Journal article, desperately looking for storytellers. They're looking for
Storytellers.
creatives because especially
Yeah.
in the AI space, things are getting more and more complex and complicated,
Yeah.
therefore harder to convey the value. So they're going back to the creatives, to the humanities, right? People that
Yay.
know how to communicate. So hey mom, my communications degree 20 years ago was not in vain.
I
But
love this.
yeah. So it's an exciting time for a lot of creatives. However,
Yes.
there's still a lot of misconceptions about these roles and what they actually like their function. And so that's the aim of the book, is to help arm organizations with the tools or the skills, at least to perform this, even if they can't hire a dedicated CSO, if you will.
Yeah, I love this. I'm so excited that the communications majors are getting some love
Totally.
now because
Absolutely.
I majored in communications and everyone's like, well, what are you going to do with that? Well, what I'm doing right now,
Yeah.
89.7 WGLS FM, the voice of Rowan College. I was a DJ. I was a
That's
D.
so awesome.
I was a DJ. That was one of the first things I did. And you know what's even funnier? I have to tell this story really quickly. I did an internship at the radio station at my college, and this
Mhm.
was like, I'm going to age myself, but like 1994. Okay, 1994. And my professor made me do an internship interviewing professors.
Oh, that's cool.
It wasn't cool as a 19-year-old,
No,
20
I
year
get
old,
that. I get that. It's an
you
interesting
know?
idea. I like that someone had the idea for that initiative. I can absolutely understand why it might have been boring or not the best job for a 19-year-old, but it was cool that that person had that idea, I think.
Yeah, well, now it makes so much sense. And when
Right.
when I started doing the podcast, I'm like, oh,
It was
that
ahead of its
no.
time for sure. Now it would be
Yes.
like, yeah, everybody's doing
Oh, that would be
that.
so smart. Why don't you just go interview all the professors and learn
Yeah,
all
yeah,
their,
yeah.
all of their ingredients for success? I want to get into this a little bit. I want to talk about how the story is the strategy and how to build a brand. People help you write. I'm so interested in the people helping us write the story. Tell
Yeah.
us, like, let's talk about that part of it.
Absolutely. So let's go back real quick to the communication thing that we were talking about, our degrees. So what are you going to do with a communication degree? Here's the thing. Communication is involved in everything that we do, in every aspect, right? We have to communicate to people if we want to collaborate with them, right? And accomplish something. It's the same thing with storytelling. Storytelling is just the manner in which we as humans communicate. It's the way
Mm,
we've always communicated. The way I mean, storytelling to me, how I define it is delivering information through emotion, wrapped up in emotion. That is how we as humans process it. Okay.
yeah.
So just to set the kind of like foundation there, storytelling is not just how we talk about our products. It is everything. It is because communication is in everything. So the second most important point to know is that every storytelling is collaborative. There is no story told that's just one way.
Right.
You have to have the audience and the participation of the audience. So if you're a stand-up comic, your jokes mean nothing unless there's an audience that laughs or doesn't laugh to them. You telling a joke in your home office doesn't do anything for you, right? If you're a writer, your words mean nothing unless someone reads it and is impacted by them. So the power of storytelling lies in the receiving of the story, not the telling.
Exactly.
That's
It,
where the transformation is.
and we don't think about that. We
No,
we
no, we
don't
think it's about how we're going to talk about our product because
Ex-
we got it. Everybody needs to know what's so cool about this.
right. And it's
We always,
about communications, like the definition of the true definition is like the the ability to create a shared meaning.
yes, yes,
It's
absolutely.
it's in the shared meaning that communication actually happens, and communication actually doesn't happen unless the listener says it does.
There you go. Spot on. And that's why we have to adjust. If the listener doesn't get it, we must be saying something wrong. It's a two-way street. So let's go back to the stand-up comic example. It's a really good one because everybody gets that. It's simple, right? So what a stand-up comic does when they are working on a special, let's say, is they travel around, they got new jokes. You might see them with a notepad or their phone and they're actually looking at them because they're trying out new material. Well, based on the response they get, they will either cut that from the from the set list, or they'll see that one part that people did respond to, and they might cut the rest and then they flesh that out a little bit. Or if people responded really well, they might double down and give that joke a few more minutes and really, really eke out every bit of laughter they can from it. So they are absolutely building their set for their special based on the response and the feedback from the people in the audience. So that is communication going two different ways. I tell you a joke, your response, whether it's nonverbal or verbal, will help me understand, okay, how can I do my job better? It's the same thing with storytelling. The listener, the story listener, is equally as important, or probably more important, as we're basically saying, than the storyteller. So when we talk about co-authoring the story with our community,
Yeah.
that's what we're looking for. So it's not about me talking about my product in a one-way street type of way. It's me. I might start the conversation that way, but I
Sure.
have to listen just as much as I tell, in fact, more. And that will inform how I talk about my product, what I
Yeah.
have heard.
A lot of people right now are in this economy of like, let's just throw videos out there.
Boy, I
There's
know.
a lot of people doing videos out there. Some of them are getting some love and some of them aren't, but I don't think people are listening in this way. It's harder to listen on social unless they're a live audience. Tell us a little bit about that because I get the audience participation. And so I do a lot of group coaching programs.
Mhm.
And so I play in the moment with people based on their expressions like,
Yeah.
oh, well, did that land right? Did that and in person and when you're speaking to a big audience, you can do that if you're paying attention to the audience.
Mhm.
What happens if you're not in the audience and you're just kind of throwing stuff out there? How do you tell people to do that?
So every chief storyteller that I interviewed for the book, I'm pretty sure 100% of them, if not the mass majority of them, their companies had some process installed into the system for finding, catching, extracting stories, right? They might be, story sharing sessions or campfire stories, some process. Now, when I say we're co-authoring it, it's not just with their audience or their community, their clients, it's also with their employees, like internally. That's equally as important. So it's not
Yeah.
just marketing telling everybody what to say. Everybody has to feed into the overall narrative and everybody has to buy into that. So that includes your external stakeholders like your customers, your clients, your community. That includes your investors. That includes your internal team, everybody.
Oh my
So
gosh.
every CSO that I spoke with that does this well and effectively, you have to buy into it as a strategy. It's not enough to just put it out there and like, yeah, we should listen to people and then not follow up on it. Like you have to believe in this and
Yeah.
actually do the work. And that's where you lose a lot of people because it sounds nice, but they get caught up and I get it. Business is tough. You've got a million things to do. But if you believe in this as a strategy, you have to build it into the system to go out there and find those stories, to go out there and listen to people. So it's not enough to just put out something on social media and see if I get any comments, because what if you don't get any comments, right? So you have to
Mm.
build a process in to do that. One of the examples I use in the book is in the early days of Nike. They were competing against, Adidas, Converse. These were like the behemoths during those days. Nike was just a scrappy startup on the West Coast, and they would go to track meets because it was a running shoe. They would go to track meets and give their prototypes, their shoes, to the runners, to the coaches in like high school and college, have them go use them, and come back and report back, their experience. They would immediately take those stories that were shared with them back to their research and development teams, and they would integrate it, like they would put it into their product development. They would go out there. Adidas is not going out, sending people physically, manually out to high school track meets, right? So they believe so much in doing that and like building for the customer with the customer that they went out there and listened to their stories and it directly affected the product that they put into the marketplace.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of like you have to literally get off your butt and go do it.
Listening. Yeah. Listening tours. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the ecosystem of storytelling for a small business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we have these examples of big companies, but when I'm working with small business owners, I feel like I want to create, like, what does that ecosystem look like? Like, if we were going to create an infographic on what that looked like, what would you have in the infographic for the ecosystem of storytelling for a small business owner?
So really it's this it is the same, even though you have a lot fewer people and probably fewer resources. But the beautiful thing about it is leading with a storytelling strategy doesn't really require, it requires changing a little bit of the work you're doing, like if you're going to have story sharing sessions. But you don't have to go out and get a lot of equipment or a lot of employees to do this. It's a mindset shift.
Yeah.
So, one thing I want to illustrate to people is that there's a big difference between narrative or brand narrative and brand stories. A misconception we hear a lot is, what's your brand story? Tell your brand stories. What I'm trying to get people and help people to understand is you have an infinite amount of stories. Stories happen all day, every day, or the opportunity for
Yeah.
stories that would be impactful, but they need to fit under this overarching brand narrative. That is the message. That is the mission that you are on, the story that you are trying to create in the world, the change you're trying to create in the world. So the stories all fit underneath that. So once you work on building this system and understanding storytelling, you will start spotting opportunities all day long for some small stories that you tell quickly on a LinkedIn post, some that are larger that are part of a 60-minute documentary I just did for a client for a small rare cancer foundation. So this is not Nike, right? This is not Apple or Coca-Cola. This is a local, regional nonprofit that's focused on a rare cancer. And they just decided, we did a feature length film, 60-minute film that's just putting out the story of their community. It's not talking about them. It's not asking for donations. It's just talking about the cause, right? Now that's a big story. Obviously, they have little ones all day long in between. So what we want to try to do is have everyone on the team, no matter if it's a team of 1, 3, or 300, aligned under, like, within that brand narrative, understanding what is the story that we are trying to tell. If you don't
Right.
do that, what happens is marketing is going to revert back to what they know, which is to, like, we need to talk about these product features and how cool our product is. Sales is going to revert to what typically works for them, whatever they've learned in their past that has
Yeah.
worked for them. Leadership might say something else. And now we've got misalignment. We're trying to have cohesion so that we're all singing the same from the same song sheet, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So it does start from the top down. This has to be something that is established and woven into the culture. And that starts with leadership. Leadership has to understand. Now, that might not be your chief storyteller, like, doing this. It might be your CEO or somebody on the founder level, but somebody has to say, this is the type of company, like, put their stake in the ground. This is the type of company that we want to be. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm answering your question directly.
Well, because, and part of that, I'm just going to talk to what you just said is like when those people go to the barbecue over the weekend and they start talking about their company,
Yeah,
it's the story that they're going to tell about the company. And then that story can get told 100 times if there's 100 employees
there
and
you
so
go.
on and so on. But yeah, I think I'm going to adapt this, Rain, if you don't mind, to the
Sure.
small business, the solopreneur. I'd love
Yeah,
to see what that looks like, because I think the idea that we're systematically listening to our clients, we are checking in, we are hearing success stories, we are telling our story. I think it is so important to our success as the business owner, and it's the emotional connection that we're making with people. That's the sticky part.
hmm,
People will remember that, how you made them feel, right? They always say that people
100%.
are not going to remember anything else but how you made them feel.
Yes, and our struggles come from an emotional perspective. I mean, we make our decisions emotionally. Everything starts from the heart, but then we justify it with logic and with reason and with our head. So it's never one or the other. And this is why I think it's very important to remember what I said in the beginning, which is storytelling is a way to deliver information through emotion. Oftentimes, historically, we think there's information that we must get across, and then there's emotional. We can have the feel good, warm fuzzies on the side too, if we have time.
Yeah.
We will add that on later. It's not. They're one and the same. And so it's very important to understand that it's not just to make people feel good, it's to make them feel a certain way to drive action, to convey the information that you want to get to across, because they don't listen and they don't understand until they're emotionally engaged. We
Yes.
will tune things out so quick. If it sounds like you're about to read the phone book to me, I'm out. I'm not even listening.
Yeah.
If you hook me emotionally, and now the neurochemicals like dopamine are spiked in my brain and I want to know what happens next. I can't wait for, the next scene, the next shot, the next question to be answered. I will lean in and then you can give me some information, but you have to hook me first.
Yeah.
So you deliver that information through emotion, but the information is still very important to get across because you do have a product to give people, right? You do have a spring sale you're trying to get across. You are trying to reach people, but that you reach them from, through the heart. It's the heart and the head operating simultaneously.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the founder's visibility. How does this help the chief executive officer become the brand of their company?
I think we're seeing a time now where many founders and many CEOs are starting to become personal brands. I know a lot that are still resistant to it, and I think that's okay, especially if you have someone who is actively owning the story, whether you call them, your narrative lead or your chief storytelling officer or whatever you want to call them. Someone has to own that, and it doesn't have to be the CEO. But again, what I like I mentioned earlier, the culture has to be shaped by the CEO or the founders. So they at least have to know that they want to use this as a strategy, that they are a brand that wants to stand for something that is not a flash in the pan, quick, trying to make a quick buck. It's not transactional, it's transformative. They are trying to change something in the world,
Yeah.
right? So the reason, or the ROI, we'll say, of storytelling as a strategy are things like not just brand recognition, but brand allegiance, brand advocacy, right? You're having people that become evangelists for your brand. That allows you to have longevity. Also, working, co-authoring the story with your evangelist, with your community, helps you be flexible. There are always going to be obstacles. That's the basis of any story, right? Things are going to happen. There's a global pandemic, whatever other economic crisis happens, or maybe you just have an internal crisis. There's always going to be things that you have to
Yeah.
overcome. So the more malleable you can be and not rigid and locked into something, locked into a technology, locked into a belief system, right? The more
Yeah.
malleable you can be, the more probable it is that you'll have that longevity. So this is why we're trying to build that allegiance. So yes, the organizational culture starts from the top down. And I do think it's very effective for founders to be able to put themselves out there. And I do that for founders. I help them capture their stories because sometimes their CEOs are I mean, this is like an obvious statement, like they're super busy. Their hands are in everything.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them too. And I understand that challenge, which is why you need someone to help facilitate it, whether it be an outside person like me or an internal person on your team that owns the story. Somebody needs to help them get that story across and not just say, like, okay, Ted or Kathy, you're the CEO, take it away, do it. Like they also are going to need help extracting that story because they might know why they started the business, but they might not know exactly where the emotional crux of that story is. That's why the creative is so important because they're trained to go find the emotional crux. They're trained to go find the arc of the story.
Yeah. So what I'm picking up something, Rain, here. I'm picking up
Tell me.
something, right? I love these conversations because it just gets my brain going.
Yeah, good.
And so what I'm hearing is like there is this, it's a real back and forth between the
Totally.
CEO, the customers, the staff, and what's happening inside of the company. There's all these different layers to this. There's so many different layers. And then there's this layer that you talked about with this evangelist. And I want to give you an example of what happened to me this weekend. So I went
Okay.
to this restaurant. You may have heard of it. It's called the Outback Steakhouse.
Heard of it.
Okay. I am obsessed with the Outback Steakhouse. I don't know why. I feel like the prices are good, the service is good, it's good every time. And so we went to the Outback this weekend. We go once a week with my mom, and we didn't get our regular waiter.
Mm-hmm. Dun,
And
dun, dun.
we go there, and there was a waiter that we love. So part of the experience is not just us going to the Outback, it's
Yeah,
this waiter.
right.
And I realized, like, when I was there, like, he is the brand. My waiter that I see at the Outback becomes the Outback brand. Because
Yeah.
when he wasn't there, it wasn't as good of an experience as it was all the other times. The consistent part was this guy because we keep asking for him. So not only is the Outback a brand, but this server becomes the brand. And like we don't even think about that because now it wasn't as good of as an experience as last time because I didn't have he's an elevated like he's been doing this for his whole life. And so
Hmm.
it's a different experience you're gonna get when you're having this server or that server. And it's a very difficult situation for us because I have an 82-year-old mother who asks for things in a certain way. And it's
Mhm.
the most stressful thing I could ever do on the weekend is go out to eat with her. So having this guy is like the highlight of my life because he knows how to handle her.
Right, right, right.
So what do you think about all this? How like it gets that micro?
It does. Well, it comes back, what I was hearing the whole time you were talking, and this is very much aligned with what we work on in this field is trust. What people don't understand or tend to overlook when they're in business is it's a relationship, whether you like it or not. Now, if you want that relationship to be one transaction and you're all about, the churn and the turnover, and they may never buy from you again, that's fine. But if you want the longevity that we're talking about and to build a sustainable brand that actually has meaning and does something, impactful for the world, then it's about transformation, trust, and relationships.
Mm.
So you have a relationship with those that you serve, whether they come back to you once a year or once a week or whatever that term is. You have a relationship with you. That's why they keep coming back to you. You have a relationship, your family has a relationship with this restaurant, and even on a more micro level with this server. So even though it was unintentional on their end, and they probably couldn't help it because do you know his name? What's the server's
I
name?
don't even know his
All
name.
right,
That's
let's
the
call him Ben.
problem.
So
Dan,
so
let's call him
let's
Dan.
call him Dan. So Dan might have been sick that day. It might have been completely out of their control. Yada
Well,
yada
his
yada.
shift was later in the day. He was coming in, but
Okay,
we had missed his
that's
shift.
fine. Dan wasn't there. So to a degree, certainly the restaurant didn't mean to do this, but it breached your trust a little bit because of your mom, right? And it makes things stressful for you. That's emotions. This guy relieved your emotions, right? So that makes you
Yes.
feel better. That increases the value. And he's not there. You were trusting that he would be there, so your emotions wouldn't, your anxiety wouldn't get heightened because of your mom's nitpickiness, right?
Oh
And
my
now he's not
gosh.
there, so now you feel alone. See, it is this deep. That's the thing. Kids these days, like to say, "Oh, it's not that deep." It is this deep. These are all the things that you're not realizing on the surface of your mind are going on in your subconscious. Oh crap, Dan's not here. Mom's going to ask for 13 things, and young Kelly over there is not going to know how to handle it,
It's
and she's probably going
exactly
to do it
that. And
right.
the whole time, all I kept doing is feeling bad for young Kelly because it's exactly who took us. It was
Yeah,
young Kelly. And I'm like, oh my God, this poor young girl is going to go to the back and cry because she has to deal with my mother. That's how deep this gets.
yeah. So I mean that the food probably didn't have anything to do with it,
The food was
right?
fine. The food was
Right.
great. But
But that's the product. So it's not about the product itself. It is about the transformation that it brings. And sometimes for you in this case, that includes the experience. I mean, dining is
yes,
an experience. It's
it
not just the
is.
food, right? Yeah, of
It's a
course.
big deal. It's a big deal.
Yes.
And I don't think we think about it enough. And I don't even know if Mr. Outback, whoever's the CEO, I really need to I think he's the next guy I'm going to talk to. I want to interview him because the CEO of Outback or whoever that restaurant group is, because, this goes really deep.
Hmm. Yeah.
So this CEO of Outback
Hmm.
and me are creating a shared story together.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, you might not be the only people who feel that way, right? You probably aren't the only nitpicky customers, clients, patrons that come in there. So what they would need to do, I mean, it's very hard. They obviously can't replicate every waiter to be Dan, right? And also, I would argue that there's another group that needs the exact opposite of what you all needed. So they need Kelly to be there, right? What they do need is for Outback to have some consistency in general, and that would be embedded in their training. And they do somewhere. It might not be
Yeah.
aligned with that. Like, here's how you handle picky clients, or it
Old
might.
people.
Yeah, that could be in their training or should be in their training because Just like one of the analogies I use for the narrative and the story comparison that I mentioned earlier is like, think about a musical, all right? Let's say, do you like musicals, musical
Yeah.
theater
Oh,
at
I
all?
love musical
Okay,
theater.
what's your favorite currently?
I mean, I really love Wicked. Let's talk
Oh,
about
great. Let's
Wicked.
use Wicked. So, when you think of a musical like that, you have all the different songs that fit in between it, the numbers, right? And all of them are varying in tone, in style, in length, in tempo, in every degree, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes you're going to have the big tentpole pieces, the defying gravity. Sometimes you're going to have the cute populars that are really,
Dancing through life, out of the offspring. You know that one?
right. So they're all varying in multitude of degrees, but they
Yes.
all are part of the same narrative, right? They all feel like Wicked songs. If all of a sudden it sounded like we were doing West Side Story, like that would be jarring, and I would not know where I am, right? So they all still have to feel the same. So it's the same way with your stories and your brand narrative. They need to feel and attach themselves to the brand narrative, but they can be different. They can have a little bit different tone. Now let's go back to the Outback example. I would argue that each server is going to be a slightly different experience, but they should still feel like they are attached to the Outback experience, whatever that might
Yes.
be. Are we silly and playful? Are we professional and serious, like a white cloth, tablecloth restaurant? Like, what is the brand? What is the vibe? What is the tone? What is the voice? This is all storytelling.
Yep.
So Dan can deliver it in a slightly different way than Kelly, but they should still feel similar at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, one of the issues was, of course, my mother's steak came out too rare. And she always has this thing about like, oh, it's got to be like exactly right. Now, if my guy came, he'd be like, oh, we'll make it again for you. You don't like it? We'll just make it
Mm.
again. Like, that's just his thing. And so the girl came over and she looked at it like she didn't know what to do. She kind of looked at the steak and was like, well, I don't know what to, like, I got to go talk to my manager. And I'm like, really? You have to go talk to your manager because the steak didn't come out? Like, she should have known what to do with that at that point. I felt bad for her a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm watching all this stuff happening. And I think it was just like, I think it was a message for me about Dan and myself on how we literally, as we're working for companies, not only is the chief executive officer part of this storytelling,
Mm.
everyone that works there is.
Boom. And you just nailed it.
Everyone.
Everyone.
I think it's a powerful lesson. What else do you want our audience to know as it relates to this topic before we end our podcast today?
Well, I mean, this is something I have said since the beginning of my career in the storytelling space, and it's my complete philosophy is like, your story is the only unique thing that you or your brand can own ever. Anybody can acquire your skills with a little bit of time. Anybody and almost everybody can acquire your tools that you have access to, especially these days. Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
access to the same things, right? But nobody on this earth has your path, your story that led you to do what you do, even if we do the same thing. In my field, a common example I use is if we took 100 people, filmmakers, and gave them all $100,000 and the same resources and told them all to make a film about the same topic. Well, you certainly should have 100 completely different films because you have 100 completely different people. Somebody might be, let's say the film is about cell phones. Then somebody's going to talk about the history of cell phones and how we got here from the telegram to the telephone to, cordless phones in your house, yada yada yada. Other people might talk about how Apple disrupted the industry. Other people might talk about the negative effects it's having on our children. Right? People are going to come at it, but they're all about cell phones. Right? This is why it's so important to one tap in and understand. A lot of people go through life and business and don't even do the self work or the inner work, the front loaded work to figure this out. So what
Mm.
happens then is they look at their competitors and be like, "Oh, they're zigging. Should I zig too?" Maybe, but maybe not. Probably not, right? Going against the grain is generally going to separate you, right? So it gets real easy to get in that competitive comparison state when you don't know what you stand for. What we are looking for is alignment with the people that we serve better than anybody else who need our product or our perspective more than anyone else's because there's going
Mm.
to be competitors, right? So that's why it's so important, because whatever led you to do what you do and led me to do what I do is unique from anybody else. They might come from the same place, they might be from the same socioeconomic status, but they didn't have every experience that I did, right? That's why it's so important to look at where you came from, who you came from, what you're interested in, what you're great at. All of these things weave together in a very beautiful, unique intersection. And that's what you need to identify to understand, oh, well, how do I approach storytelling differently than the ex Google marketer?
Yeah.
Or how do I approach storytelling different than the guy who does the moth, storytelling competition? He's a live storyteller. How do I approach it different than, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Even if people are very similar to what I do, there's still something in my story that's going to be vastly different. And that's what we want to lean on. It's the same thing with your brand. Why did you set out to create a ballpoint pen, right? I'm thinking of a small business right now in my hometown that's called Pamlico Pen Company, like randomly. Why did you create a pen company? Anybody can create a pen company. What drew you to it? What was your goal? Where do you want it to go? What's the future story you're trying to tell? So that's what I would leave everybody with, is like, that's the single most valuable asset you have. And it's so neglected, it's so overlooked. There is, in my opinion, somebody may prove me wrong one day, there is nothing else that you can uniquely own more than your story.
I love it. Rain, where can our audience find out more about what you're doing?
Well, Rain Bennett is my name. My website is rainbennett.com. I'm very often online, so I'm easy to find up there. The book is coming out August 25th. It's called The Chief Storytelling Officer. The good news is, I don't know if you're on video, but there's a card for it. It's not focusing. The pre-orders are open now. So my goal is to get the book on bookstore shelves, and the best way to do that, if I could make an ask of your audience, is if they are interested in pre-ordering, is to do it on barnesandnoble.com, because that's what sends the signal to physical bookstores. And if they do that and they send me the receipt, I will gladly sign them and send them a free extra copy, and then they can give the one
Oh,
they can give the one away that they bought to a small business owner or someone else that would benefit from it. But if they pre-order from Barnes and Noble, I will absolutely sign them a personal autograph copy and send it to them free of charge.
I love it. And I have your book right here, 6-second stories.
Yes, that was the first
Six
one in
second stories.
2021. Yes, that was about short form video storytelling, like
Oh,
social media.
wow. All right. Well, I have this, but I haven't read it yet, Rain. I have to say, but I'm going to read it. And then I'm going to talk about it because I love,
Love it.
oh, here, the science of storytelling. This is really good. All right, guys. It's called 6 second stories. Maximize your impact in minimal time with video storytelling. And it's autographed. I have an autographed copy.
Hey, of
Very exciting. Well, Rain, thank you so much for being a guest on the Stay on Course
course.
podcast.
I appreciate it.